Welcome to another episode of Over This Should podcast. Today, we're exploring the profound impact of personal growth in our lives. We're honored to have Dana from Christian Comfort Counseling with us. Dana is a compassionate and skilled counselor dedicated to helping individuals and couples navigate the complexities of relationships and personal challenges. With a foundation rooted in Christian values and a deep understanding of the Gottman method, Dana provides insightful guidance to strengthen and heal relationships. Join us as we delve into Dana's journey, the principles of effective couples counseling, and how faith and science come together in her practice. Welcome to the show, Dana.
Thanks, Pamela. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Is there anything I left out of the intro that you want to share with us?
No, well, I guess the only little tiny thing is I do retreats. My husband and I travel, and we do marriage enrichment retreats. So we help couples to grow closer because it's interesting. So many times there's all the premarital talk, and maybe you have to go meet with your pastor or your priest or someone. And then after people are married, it's almost like, okay, you're on your own. And yet, we really need support during marriage. And doing that work, that's part of what led me to realize how much work really needs to be done so that we choose wisely when we marry. That way, we have less conflict, less chance of a divorce down the road.
Ooh, so many good topics. I can't wait to get in with you. Tell me how you got started in this. What led you to counseling, and specifically what led you to relationships?
So I was a high school psychology teacher. I taught school for 16 years, and it was so much fun to teach psychology because you could get in so many life lessons. And I'm amazed at how many of my students, and now they're all grown, have written me over the years saying, I'm a therapist because of you, or I'm a psychiatrist or psychologist. So that is the coolest honor that I was the little tiny bit of that beginning journey. But what would happen is parents would come to me, and it was interesting. They were always parents of athletes who would come to me. It was very odd. And at first I thought it was odd. Now I think it's just God doing his thing. And they would say, well, my child is an equestrian, but she's getting in her head, and now she doesn't think she can do jumps with her horse. And she used to do them all the time. Or my child is a top swimmer, but now they're in their head. Same thing. And they would say, what should I do? And I would look around and I'd be like, I'm not a therapist. I'm a teacher. Like, I don't know what to say. And then they would keep talking, and I would say, well, the book says, and I would explain to them what sports psychologists say in some of the exercises from our materials. And they would go, okay. They would go try it with their child, come back and say, it worked, thank you. And that kept happening again and again. I don't know if the parents talked or what. And I finally thought, okay, I think God's telling me something. So I taught school full time, went back to grad school, or went to grad school, and had breast cancer all at the same time. So
Wow.
it was quite a crazy, crazy time in my life.
That
To
is a
be
lot going on at once.
a lot going on at once. And then when I first had couples coming to me, there would be so much contention with them. And I would have that flat effect of a therapist that we're supposed to have. We're not supposed to be like, overly emotional about a lot of things. But inside I'd be thinking, oh Lord Jesus, help me. Like, what do I say to these people? Even though I'm trained to work with these people, it would just be so intense. And so I said, Lord, I don't know if I'm supposed to work with couples.
Mm.
And if I am, please make it really obvious to me. Every phone call for months that I received was about couples counseling. I was like, okay, I get it. Okay. And so then I got the Gottman training, and that helped tremendously.
Yeah, so I love to dig into that with you. But let's start with, if you are a single person.
I'm very, very happily married, and that's part of why I feel so confident in working with single Catholic women to help them to discern between Mr. Right and Mr. Wrong. It's because it's the journey I took. How did I get out of really unhealthy, toxic relationships? Every relationship I had had before my sweet husband David was unhealthy. Every single one, starting from high school.
Say we're talking to single women now. What should they be doing and looking for in order to put themselves on the path of a healthy relationship?
Is for someone who wants their good. what's good for them, because so often these women will be with men who don't really want what's good for them, but they're mouthing the words, I love you.
Mhm.
But love is an action, love is a verb. So they can say it all day long, but they're not actually doing the thing. And when there are red flags, what I've noticed is, and this really pained me so greatly, and this is why I decided, okay, I cannot just work with women in my therapy practice because I'm limited to how much time I have with them. And then they're going to talk about their boss and their sister and their neighbor and should they move. And we get this much time on the relationship issues, and my head is almost on fire because I'm thinking they don't see it. They've just told me 29 red flags in 10 seconds and they don't see it, because what would happen is they would say, well, let's say his name is John Doe. John brings me flowers. John holds car doors open for me. Okay, great. And then they would say, and the other day I was late by a few minutes. I'm never late. Just something, happened. And he yelled at me and then he called me names. And they'll say it like, oh, I had a hamburger for lunch. They just let it pass by. And I'm like, okay, let's go back to that. What was that? Oh, he was just in an upsetting mood. He was just, well,
Yeah.
that's actually emotional abuse. And
Mhm.
they would go, Dana, and it's almost like all the women got together and read the same scripts. I really think it's these shoulds from society that are coming at them. It's like, you should give this guy a second chance. Why? Why are you giving this guy a second chance when he's already revealed to you who he is, how he operates in life, and where you fit into it? And so I call it the good guy fallacy, because they would push back and they would say, Dana, no, 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 no. I misrepresented him. I now feel terrible. They would go in this whole spiral, shame spiral, which is where that word should often fits, not always, but often fits in there. And they would ignore the unhealthy stuff. And so I have a couple of French doors in my therapy office. I said, okay, let's pretend these doors are bulletin boards. And we have a post-it flowers. Where do I put it? Oh, that side, that's the good side. Okay, all the other nice things. Where do I put he yelled at you? And where do I put he called you names? Where did those go? And they would just sit there and
Mhm.
just blink. So I call it the good guy fallacy. Like,
Yeah.
just because he does something nice, I mean, hello, Hitler was an okay artist. Mm. Right? It
Not
just
good
doesn't
guy.
make sense. Yeah, Ted Bundy had, some people thought he was handsome. Mm. Like,
Mhm.
okay, that's just not enough. And it's sad for me how many women settle. And when I dig in and we slowly peel back the layers, it always comes back to, I thought he was the best I could get, and I felt lucky to have him. So
Yeah.
we have to heal that insecurity, that
Yeah.
inner child work, right? To go from
Mhm.
insecure to a secure attachment. Because what woman in her right mind would say that's what she wants? So I use a matchmaker analogy. I say, okay, if I was your matchmaker, I don't do that, but if I was, and I said to you, oh, I have a file and it has all the criteria that you wanted. And you're, oh my gosh, Dan, that sounds great. And I go, I'm so sorry. I mixed up your file. This is for one of my VIP clients. And I put it aside. And I go, okay, here's your file. So you wanted tall, dark, green eyes. Okay, I found them. Oh, great. And then I start going through the attributes. I say he's a really great cook. He's a hunter. He's a great dancer. He's going to yell at you and call you names and make you feel like nothing. And he's going to gaslight you and manipulate you. But in public, he's just gonna put it on so everyone thinks he's great. He's gonna be very covertly manipulative.
Mm.
And the
Right.
women always look at me like, okay, so, and I usually use the examples they've given me in my examples. And I'll say, what would you think of me as a matchmaker? Oh, I would think you were terrible. Would you fire me? Right? Yeah, I would. Okay. Would you write a really bad, Yelp review about me? Oh, yeah, Dana, I would. I would tell everyone, don't ever go to her. I said, but you're the matchmaker.
Right. Right. Why aren't you firing him? So much to think about there, because I think we don't always recognize emotional abuse as abuse in society. In fact, I think if you got together with a group of girlfriends and they're all in relationships or marriages, um, and I will speak from women I work with and from my own personal experience here, that they say, oh, but you know how hard it is to find a guy that opens the door for you and then he brings you flowers still? Like, I know he yells, like guys get upset. They have a lot of anger they're working through. They can't process like women. So your girlfriends are telling you things like this. And then you're looking around, and women tend to be more nurturers.
Mhm.
And if you are anything like me, I had a lot of negative self-talk growing up, and I carried it with me well into my adulthood. And so when I was in an emotionally abusive relationship for a very long time, when I got called all of the names, it
Mhm.
was very self-affirming. You know what? I am dumb. I
Mhm.
am, like, all the cuss words. I am those things. That's true. And it was a really toxic mental roller coaster to be on.
Mhm.
I do want to ask a question. In
Sure.
this scenario, she's single, so she has a choice to exit cleanly,
Mhm.
well, as cleanly as you can. Okay, but say she married John Doe. Can John Doe change?
It's possible. And first, let me say this. I'm sorry that you went through what you went through. That must have been incredibly painful and isolating and shaming.
Hmm.
It's scary, probably
Very
scary at
scary.
times, right? So I'm so sorry you went through that. And I'm so grateful that that's in your past,
Hmm.
right? So that's a beautiful thing. So if the man does not have a personality disorder, so every sociopath, or formally it's antisocial personality disorder, or sometimes people will say psychopath, and I won't get into this distinctions right now. It doesn't really matter. Every every sociopath is a narcissist, but every narcissist isn't necessarily a sociopath. But both of those personality types are going to treat everyone that feeds them emotionally, because they're so empty inside that they're like emotional vampires. They're going to use and abuse many people in their life. The people they don't abuse is because they're just manipulating them in some way to make them think they're good so that the whole world wouldn't be against them. So there's a lot of covert narcissism going on. So if someone has a painful past and they learn some unhealthy behaviors and they know they're doing it, and they don't just say, okay, it's just how I am, because I get that a lot from
Hmm.
these husbands, and not all husbands. I have a lot of couples come to me that they love each other and they just need to improve their communication. Those
Right.
aren't the people I'm speaking about, but they'll often say, that's just my personality. No, you weren't born a jerk. There isn't a jerk trait that people are born with, right? That doesn't happen. No, that's something that you've been through things, and that's the way you react in the world. And what's interesting is these men on the surface, they often look, all, big man on campus, and
Hmm.
look at me, or in public, they'll be like, my wife. But behind the scenes, they're horrible to her. But they need everyone to think that they're great, because if not, then they're going to be able to figure out what they're doing behind the scenes. So most of the time, by the time it gets to counseling, they're not going to change. And what I've seen is women will come to me and they'll say, it's working. He's doing more of this and less of this. And I go, that's great. And then I'm just thinking inside, when am I going to get the call?
Hmm.
Dana, I need to come back in, because things are going to go south again. So most of the time, the men don't want to change.
Right.
It's working for them. Why would they change?
Yeah, no. I think you change enough to pull the partner back in. And then if you have not worked through your own issues and your
That's
own
right.
baggage and your own trauma, you fall back into the patterns and the habits that you've developed. It's just human
It's
nature.
it's homeostasis, because it's comfortable, not like, oh my gosh, this feels so great. It's familiar.
Hmm.
And we do what works for us. So if we have a four, like my son's grown, but let's say, okay, he was 4 years old. If he threw a fit, now I wasn't the mother who put up the fits. I'll just say I was a very disciplined mother, and I had a very disciplined teacher, as my former students could attest to. But if he threw a fit and I thought, okay, I'm just tired, I'm going to give in. Fine, here's your candy that you want before dinner. 10 minutes ago I said, no candy, no candy before dinner. I'm training him. I'm rewarding his bad behavior.
Hmm.
So don't reward bad behavior. And the other thing I hear all the time, and it goes along with this, is okay, we have the good guy fallacy, is how often, and it actually happened in my office yesterday, how often women will say to me, The first time he called me a name or screamed at me, I said, "Hey, I'm not going to put up with that. You can't do that to me." Okay, so you said that when you were dating, you were 3 months in. Okay, how long have you been married now? 15 years, whatever. And you dated for years, so 16 years. How many times has he called you names or yelled at you, whatever? Oh, and they go on about all the occasions. But I thought you said he couldn't. And they're very serious and they'll be like, "Yes, that's right. I've told him that." And I'll say, "But he does." Because in their mind, they set a boundary.
Right.
That's not a boundary. A boundary is if you choose to call me names, I choose to leave.
I want to talk about women. I'm in corporate America. I have a
Yeah.
really busy job, 3 teenagers.
Yeah.
So when I think about myself and my cohort of friends and colleagues, one of the things that comes up a lot is we're married, but we are freaking exhausted because while we're married, we're single moms because so much of the responsibility of the household still falls on women, the domestic labor, the unseen, unpaid pieces of it.
Mhm.
And expectations haven't changed across the board. So women now work, women are doing different things outside of the house that didn't happen before, but the expectations in the family household haven't necessarily changed. Are you seeing that in your practice? And how would you help people kind of get back to even ground in a marriage?
That is so common, right? So you're not alone in that, as you know. Um, yeah, it's interesting how women did all those things primarily. I mean, there were a few exceptions, right? And then once women entered the workforce and now they're in corporate America and all these things that really began strongly, a little in the 70s, but really the 80s is when that push was. But you're right. All the research shows women still carry so much of that.
Yeah.
So I think part of it is talking with your spouse. Some people may live with their partner, whatever the situation is. And it's what works for our family.
Mhm.
So if it's okay, we bathe the kids together when they're little because that way we're all together. It's a bonding thing. Or is it I bathe them on alternate nights so you can go and take a breath?
Mm.
Or you mow the lawn so I can do the laundry. And so for my husband and I, I'm very blessed to have married the most amazing man like God ever created. And all my girlfriends, even the ones who are very happily married, that his name is David, they always go, "David," when they say his name, they sigh because he's just the sweetest. And they all know my story, what I've been through. And they're just like, if anyone deserves a David, it's you, Dana. So I think it's for each couple to work those things out. And if you feel that your spouse respects you and again wants your good, then if normally you did the dishwasher, but you have a thing to do, they should step in and be what we call in counseling responsive to your needs. Responsive doesn't mean, okay, that's not enough. It means I have a need. What can you do to help me? So right now, while I'm launching this new program for women, I'm so busy. I still have retreats that we're leading. I have 2 coming up in the next month, one for 3 days. I
Wow.
have a speaking engagement, another one. So that's 3 events. And this is all, I have less than a month until my program launches. Then I have my regular clients, and then I'm launching this program. So I'm always researching. So I'm so busy. My husband, because he loves me and he's proud of me, he is stepping up and filling in the gap. He just feeds me 3 times a day plus snacks. Where in the past I'd be like, "Hey, I'll handle dinner." And that's one thing you want to marry someone that isn't rigid. And have you heard of the way you test that when you're dating? Do you know this little trick?
No, tell me.
Okay, it's so cool. So, and there's good research behind it. So, okay, you're going to go out with John Doe. Okay, you're single back in the day. And you're going to go to dinner on Saturday night, 7 p.m. You're meeting at a restaurant, Italian food. Okay. I would call and change one detail. "Hey, John, I'm really looking forward to tomorrow night. I've had a thing come up, and so I need to push it back 30 minutes." Or, "I had Italian for lunch." Go eat Italian so you're not lying, all right? "I had Italian for lunch, and I only eat it every so often. Could we do something else?" When a man wants a woman, He won't care if it is, we'll go to a hot dog vendor outside of a hardware store where, like, I'll go anywhere just to be with you. I'll go to Costco and get pizza. But a controlling man who will be inflexible and will never dig in and support you when you're like, okay, I'm barely treading water here. That man will get angry. So that's a great test up front. And again, men can use the same thing with women to see if that person is controlling.
That's
They'll,
really
they'll
interesting.
reveal themselves up front.
Yeah, that's a great one to try out. I like that. And then not to do the same one over and over, but find other creative ways to have that kind of test in the beginning stages of a relationship, because it's been my experience that a controlling person can seem awfully loving in the very beginning, and
Oh,
then their
yes.
patterns change.
Then their pattern change. That's why now there are exceptions to this. You do meet couples where they have a great, healthy marriage, like everyone knows that they're just amazing and it's not fake and it's not covert and
Mhm.
manipulative, and that they met and married in 3 months. Okay, that's the exception.
Right.
Usually, if a man comes in, and I really haven't heard this so much about women doing this, I'd have to look into the research of that. But when men come in and at the beginning they're love bombing, so if I think, okay, I think I'm an attractive person, but this guy goes on ad nauseum about my beauty, and after a while I think, like, thank you, but hmm. And everything is just intense, and then they'll come in fast, whirlwind. It's so that it's, oh, we met for coffee, lunch, dinner. Then when I met his parents on the third date, and then he's asking me what kind of engagement ring would I like. Okay, this is not wartime where we're
Right.
about to go into World War II, and I met a guy and we've been married now for 59 years and we're so happy. They're doing that because that way there's smoke and mirrors
Mhm.
and you won't see past it. But usually when women will say to me, I saw nothing, no red flags. There's only one person that I have ever met that I think that may have been possible, that the person was so good at being manipulative. But I know that in my past, with my first husband, we're dating and we're have about a 30-minute drive to go to his family's house. And he gets really quiet in the car. And I thought, there's been a shift. Is something wrong? Mm. Hmm. Meet the parents, go to church. We're Catholic, so it's going to be a good hour. And he's not looking at me. He's not like responding to anything like, oh, isn't that beautiful with the pre. No, not, So later on, I said, what's happened? And he says, that man you were looking at. What? What man? What are you talking about? Yeah, that man. Apparently, while we were driving, and hello, Texas highways, if you've ever been on one, people are cruising.
Mhm.
Apparently, I looked at a man, like a man who was going by in his, what? And what I did is, it's what we do when someone accuses us of something we haven't done. We start to self-doubt. That's
Right.
what gaslighting is. And so I started thinking, did I? And I thought, no, I did not. I don't even know what he's talking about. But why at that point did I not say, that's nuts? I'm not going to be with someone who accuses me of ridiculous things that never happened. And the number one sign of that you're getting an abusive relationship is always jealousy. And so even though I knew he was wrong, I thought, okay. And I stayed with this man and married him.
And then you put on blinders and never looked left and right just so you couldn't get accused of something you never did anyway.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I had to be more cautious. And by the time the marriage was ending, when I heard him come home, my whole body, I would just start to shake and I would catch myself in that hypervigilant, is anything out of place?
Yeah.
Uh, It got to the point where I'd be quizzed and
Yeah.
my life got smaller and smaller and isolated until one day I simply thought, I'm going to die if I stay here. I'm tall, I'm 5'8". I was down to 117 pounds because I couldn't eat because my stomach was always in knots. And I thought, I'm going to die. And so that was that for me. I wasn't going to be abused anymore.
That's a really powerful story. Thank you for sharing that. I think there's
Mhm.
probably a lot of women listening who will connect with that. If they are in that situation, how do you help them? What do they do next?
To notice that you've most likely been isolated.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's not like you have a loving husband who says, "Hey, I think your friend Jane Doe, honey, she's toxic. She does these things. You get upset every time you see her." That's what a normal husband would say. But that would be like one friendship you've had forever and you let that person go because you realize they're not good for you. That's not what this is. So they isolate and they're like your parents, your friend, your cousin, because they don't want you, right? You've probably lived with that. They don't want you to have anyone to turn to. Because if I went to someone and said, he said this thing about this guy, or he said that he made me cry about the dish in the sink, they would say to you, something's wrong. And that actually happened on a girls' trip. I went out every year, me and some girlfriends would go on this trip and we just shopped and stuff. We just were moms and we would just have fun and go to Austin and stuff like that. And one night, it was not my plan. I broke down and the stuff started coming out of me about what he was doing. And they looked at me and they said, "That's not normal," because I couldn't see it because of what I grew up with.
Yeah.
To me, having someone treat you that way was normal. So, first of all, it's to reach out. If you're like, "I have no friends or family," or people have told me, "I love you," he's a jerk. I cannot be around him anymore. So I'm going to love you from really far away. Then call a domestic violence hotline. Call someone, call your local church. Even if you don't go there, "Hey, I live up the road from you. Can you help me?" They almost always have resources to help people. And to get a good therapist who's aligned with your values, who
Mm-hmm.
is going to see that you're not nuts, you're
Right.
not wrong, you're not bad, all the things they put on you. Because I was looked up and down, and contempt is the worst. Like we talked earlier about the Gottmans, there are four horsemen of the apocalypse. The worst of the fourth. And I remember he looked me up and down from head to toe. And I'd said, I'm a good wife. And he said, "Good. What's good about you?" Okay, I'm human. I have bad days. I have some vices. I don't have every virtue on earth. But
Mm-hmm.
to look me up and down and say, "What's good about you?" Well, dude, you're not very good at picking women if you picked me and I'm so horrible. And that little boy of ours, he's half me,
Right. Right.
right? And the
Mm-hmm.
way they treat the wife, they most likely will treat the children down the road.
Mm-hmm. It's very
Yeah.
true.
So don't be isolated, get help.
And I want to dig into the four horsemen before we get there. Talking to our friends can feel embarrassing or shameful for us. Calling an outside group and like bringing spotlight into your family could feel really hard, but getting an unbiased therapist to talk to
Yes.
is incredibly valuable.
I'm with you on that. I think we do have to be careful with who we go to for advice
Mm-hmm.
because there are some different groups that I've been in before where a woman will say things like you and I have shared today that I think any therapist would be like, "Yeah, that's not healthy." And these women say, "Yes, but why don't you just make love to him more often? Like, have you put your pearls on as you vacuumed? Like, have you done?" But I'm amazed at how often I mean, obnoxious behavior, not like, "Well, I can kind of see his side of it." No, in your face, emotionally abusive relationship. And these women saying, "Yes, but you need to read this book about how to be a better wife."
Mm-hmm.
What? I don't care if she was the cruddiest wife on earth. Why would he speak to her that way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
It's just amazing. So we have to be really careful who we go to.
I agree with you. Who we share our story with really
Yep.
matters. Okay, so let's talk about the four horsemen. Contempt?
Yeah, that's the worst one. And the Gottmans have it's jokingly called a love lab. It's an apartment. setting, right? And in the public areas, not in the restroom or the bedroom, there's, cameras and all these things. And so they have this very, very detailed, complicated system of how the researchers rate what they see. And they just tell the couples, just go live your life. Hey, I'm making some toast. The husband's like reading the newspaper back when people read newspapers and stuff. Okay. And they've done these as longitudinal studies. So once the couple leaves, and if they have seen the four that I'm about to mention or the other three, then they check on them for years. And these are very expensive ways to do research, right? It's just so much effort and money. And the couples who continue these behaviors and didn't apply the antidotes that they were taught to do, because there are antidotes to these things, there's a 96% chance that they will divorce. So they can predict it. And they're not predicting it like, oh, I want the world to be a negative, sad place. You're going to get divorced. It's just that's reality. That's what happens. So the worst is contempt. Then there's stonewalling. That is shutting down your spouse, ignoring them to punish them. That's different than I'm upset and I just need a little time to myself and I'll talk to you in a little bit. No, that's not the same thing. Or I need to cool down. I'm going to my sister's for a few days. I need to hang out the lake and then you and I will talk and we'll figure. No, they act like their spouse isn't there. And so they may say like, children, tell your mother it's time that we all go to bed now. Why are the kids in between, right? What is happening here? Okay, that happens. Okay, another one is criticism. It's okay to complain. So it's okay to go, oh, I thought that the yellow would be a little brighter. Okay, you wanted it brighter. But criticism is that, oh my gosh, like what idiot picked this shade? It's that just constantly you can't ever do anything right. There's too much salt in the food. There's not enough salt in the food. Why'd you cook roast beef? Like I got in trouble one time from my first marriage where he yelled at me for making spaghetti for dinner.
Hmm.
Okay, you love the way I make the spaghetti. Why are you yelling at me? I had that for lunch. That I'm supposed to psychically know what he had for lunch at a business meeting.
Right.
Then there is defensiveness. So if you go to your spouse, you're upset about something or you're concerned about something, you need a new roof, whatever it is, and they immediately pop back, well, yeah, 5 years ago, you looked at me funny. I'm coming to you now because the thing happened 20 minutes ago or yesterday, and we need to talk about it, but they don't talk about that. They bring up something else, or the phrase that narcissists say and sociopaths say, I never said that, or that never happened. And what do normal people do? No, I know he said it because I remember thinking this when he said it.
Mm-hmm.
Or I remember what he was wearing when we were standing. I remember what I could smell like. So those are the things that if those are not healed, and they come up so often in unhealthy marriages, and they typically show up before these people ever move in together, get married, usually those signs are already there.
Yeah, and I think depending on your EQ and the what you've worked through and the baggage that you have, and then your attachment style, some of these things like defensiveness might just be a natural reaction, or you might have been criticized, so you turn to criticism as a natural reaction. So knowing that, what are the anecdotes that people can apply to those?
Yes. Okay, so part of it is to be able to speak to your spouse when you are calm, so that you can say like, okay, I feel defensive, recognize I'm feeling defensive, and to be able to sit down and have a decent conversation with them about it, that they're not there to attack you. All right. To be able to catch your spouse doing good things, to have that attitude of gratitude is part of it. So if my husband and I had a reality show, that would never be a good thing on earth, because we're goofy and we do silly, boring things like jigsaw puzzles together. We have a pretty simple little life. But if there were microphones in our house, so much of the day you would hear please and thank you, excuse me, because we're polite to each other. Why should we not be more polite to our spouse than I would a stranger?
Right.
on the street, right? And then to be able to start off conversations with a soft startup, a gentle start, because research shows if the first 3 minutes of a conversation typically is how it will end. So if I come to my spouse, I'm like, oh, there you go, doing it again, your thing, and you're always, who wants to see that? Who wants to hear that?
Right.
That does not make someone say, oh, I want to come towards you. It's repelling.
Hmm.
Well, why wouldn't a person get defensive? Not like their actual fist up, but just that protectiveness. Why wouldn't they? So instead, let's use one of the Gottman techniques of, I feel, okay, frustrated. I need you to put your socks in the laundry hamper. In what situation? When we have guests coming over, right? To be clear with the person. So those are some of the things that can help calm those other tendencies down.
Yeah.
And you can also say to your spouse, if they come at you in a hard way, you could say something like, ouch. And when you say ouch, unless you cut your finger, that means I just got zinged. Or you could say, honey, could you please rephrase that? Okay, I didn't realize I was speaking so sharply. Okay, let me take a breath. Honey, could you please hand me the screwdriver? Like whatever the thing is. It's to assume the best about your spouse. Now, if you're married to someone that you know, like, I chose poorly, I know that now. I'm in it. I'm not divorcing. I have these children. I'm just not doing that. I'm going to stay in it. All you can really do is manage the situation. You can't cure it, right? But you can work on how you approach each other. But if you have a normal spouse who has issues, who doesn't have issues?
Right.
Like one of the codes in counseling that we can use for insurance is an adjustment disorder. Well, I always jokingly tell people on the phone, I've adjusted since breakfast. Like who has it? Like we're all doing stuff. So I'm like, don't freak out when that's what we're going to put on the paperwork for you to get, any reimbursement back or anything. So it's to assume the best, because if you don't, and you think, well, that's what you just do. Well, what if your spouse in 2 minutes has a perfectly reasonable explanation for what just happened? But you're like, oh, there you go again. Just assume the best. And if your spouse keeps doing the same thing again and again, when you're not angry, that's the time to be like, hey, honey, do you have time to talk about? I feel really frustrated. I've noticed a pattern recently. And then go into that softer startup. And when
Right.
couples come back to me and I'm like, so how have things gone? Did you try this technique or this? So often they'll be like, yeah, we didn't do that. That's why insurance companies don't like to pay for marriage counseling. Because if it's good marriage counseling, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And I'm amazed at how often they'll say, well, I did a version of, we have a break ritual that you can take. And it's a really smart research-based way to go about like, hey, I'm getting a little hot under the collar. Can we take a break? And then there's a little
Right.
pattern you follow. And I'll say, so how did it go? Oh yeah, we took a break the other day. Okay, tell me what it looked like. And it never looks like what I taught them. It's always, well, I stormed out of the room. I don't remember talking about storming out of the room for. Well, it's better than me cursing. Okay, I'm going to give you that. It is better than you cursing.
I stormed out of the room. I went to bed angry. Okay, so some of the things that I think I heard is
Uh,
always assume good intent. Start there first.
mhm.
What resonated with me is Brene Brown's words, clear is kind, unclear is
Yeah.
unkind. So be clear with
Yes.
your needs and your expectations.
Yes.
Really start with I statements. I feel, I
Mhm.
see, versus you do, you are.
That's right.
But then also just hearing you say, like, I feel frustrated. So maybe even, I know this sounds really crazy, but I had to do this for myself. Get a list of feelings, like go to Google and Google all the feelings, because I feel resentful. I feel frustrated. I
Yeah.
feel tired. I feel unmoored, like so many
Mhm.
words that you might
Mhm.
even recognize your feelings, because I stay up on the level that I know, which is like, I'm happy, I'm angry, I'm sad, but there's so many more words you can use to
That's
describe how
right.
you're feeling and kind of unlock something for you. So assume good intent, use I say,
Yes.
get familiar with what the feelings are that are actually in your toolbox,
Mhm.
and then clear as kind.
Yes, I love that. Brene Brown, she's so brilliant. Her research is incredible.
She is amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so this conversation has been really good, and I want to respect your time. How can people find you? How can they work with you?
So for now, what I'm really focusing on are these single Catholic women. And again, non-Catholics can join the group. So if you feel like you're drawn to the wrong men, that this is a pattern in your life, and you want to turn that around, I'll show you how to do it. And I have free tools and resources and all sorts of great stuff. So people will go to clarityplease.com, clarityplease.com. They can get all sorts of great things that can help them. And then if they want to reach me personally, they can go to dananygaard.com, and Dana's D-A-N-A, Nygaard, Nygaard.com.
We'll put that in the show notes too for everybody. That's great. I like to leave the show with the guest favorite quote. So, do you have a quote you'd like to share with us today?
I do. Okay, that is a great one. So, one of my favorites is, let me make sure I say it correctly and I don't reverse it. An ugly truth is better than a beautiful lie.
Is that Glennon?
I had to look it up. I know I've looked it up before. I have to, I don't
Okay.
remember. When I read that, it got me here because I
Mhm.
grew up in a home where they said truth like the word, but it wasn't. And
Mhm.
so I got so used to things not being what they are that then that's what was familiar to me, which is why for so long I picked unhealthy men. And it was when I realized I'm the common denominator with these men. Okay, what does that mean? And when I dug in and started doing attachment work, healing the inner child. So if you go to my bedroom right now, which no one's going to go, that'd be weird. But if you did, you would see a picture of me beside my bed of me at, it's supposed to be 4 years old. I think I may be five. There aren't a ton of pictures of me when I was little that I have access to. And that's little Dana. And so when I was doing my healing process, I would talk to her and I would say, I mean, I know she's not like a real person run around anymore, but she's still within me.
Yeah.
And I would say, like, hey, today you have a big day. This is what's happening. I'm going to show up. Adult Dana's going to show up. I got you. You're okay. Or we're going to go do a fun thing that you love doing later for that little girl
Mhm.
inside of me. So I reparented and made up for the gaps that I didn't receive from my own parents.
That's really beautiful. I love the idea. I know folks who have their like 4-year-old picture on their phone as their screensaver too, just somewhere accessible to them. It's a really
Mhm.
great technique. I remember hearing, do something today that makes your 80-year-old self so proud looking back and your 8-year-old self so excited for what you're about to do. And I just thought that was absolutely beautiful, great way to live. And it sounds
I
kind of like what you're applying to.
Yes, I love that. And because I am married to such a good, just my husband has a servant's heart. He's so amazing. He'll do things like 1 year for Easter, he's like, come outside in the backyard. I'm like, it is morning. What? Like, I'm not a morning person. The fact that I'm up this early with you, angels are right now, right? And so he says, come in the backyard. I'm thinking, what plant is he going to show me? Like, what is happening? And I go outside and my jaw drops and I'm looking around. He did an Easter egg hunt for me
Oh,
because he said, I know, even though my parents, yes, we did have some Easter egg hunts and things, he knew the little girl and would be excited. So sure, there's candy in some of the eggs, but there were gifts like that he would give me, like you do in a stocking stuffer for your wife.
oh my
Every
goodness.
year he fills my stocking up and he allows me to tell this story because you always ask permission before you share your spouse's stories.
Mhm.
That when we first married, I've already had my son from before, and my son's stocking was full. My new husband's is full, and mine has nothing. And he goes, well, what about your stocking? And I looked at him, and at this point, my son's like, 13 or 14, and I said, there's like, there's no sand, there's no, oh, that never happened again.
Oh,
I know he's so adorable.
yeah, he learned.
Every year, yes, that's it. He's responsive to my needs. So to love your spouse's inner child. So at the State Fair of Texas, which is a huge thing here, it's gigantic in the Dallas area, he got me a cotton candy. Do I need cotton candy at my age? No, but he got me a cotton candy because what little girl does like, I want cotton candy, right? One time I rented for my husband's birthday, we went and well, he didn't know this was happening, it was a surprise, but he loves trains. He just has an affinity for trains and the sounds and just the history of it. So I got us a hotel for his birthday that's in a converted caboose.
Oh my goodness.
Watching his face as I'm like, okay, you can open your eyes now. And he's like, this is for us. It was so precious. That's his little boy. So if we like to antique in little towns in Texas, so if we go someplace, oh, they have antique stores, we're going to go here. They have a cool museum. I always say, babe, do they have a train depot? Because most little towns have one. And I'm sorry, most of the stuff is the same in all of them. I go and look. I don't say like, oh my gosh, like when are we going to leave? Like, I don't roll my eyes. He is in heaven looking at these things. I'm happy because my husband's happy.
Mhm.
So find someone who's going to love you,
Yeah.
and life is so much sweeter.
Yeah. So what I heard there is get you a man that makes your friends say, David.
Yes, because he just
This has been enlightening. I am so grateful for what you shine the light on for being single, being in relationships, how to get healthier in your relationship. And for all of the single Catholic women or non-Catholic who are looking to exit that toxic cycle and really heal some of the experiences and past versions of yourself that have led you to where you are, get with Dana, because it sounds like this is a real game-changing program and opportunity. And then one day you have the kind of relationship that is founded on an attitude of gratitude for each other, which is huge. Thank
love that.
you so much, Dana. Thank you for
This
being
has been
here.
this has been fun, and I love that you and I we have more in common than we have the differences, right? I just love the common ground. It's just so great to meet you, and this is a blessing. The work you're doing, this is a huge blessing. So your corporate job is very blessed. I don't even know what you do for a living, but they're very blessed to have you.
Oh, thank you.